Yo guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. So today I've just jumped on to do my pre-market Forex forecast, and this will be the forecast for the week commencing with 15th of August ending with 19th of August. And before we get started guys, I'll just draw your attention to the written version of this forecast. So the written version of this forecast is linked in the description, and if there's anything unclear in the video version, then it should be explained clearly in the written version. Alright guys, so let's just jump into it. Alright, so Nzdusd starting on the daily chart this week. So overall, from the last few weeks I've been talking about, we're in this overall sell thesis. So for me, until we violate this line here, the sell thesis invalidation, it makes sense that price is going to basically react off this order block up here, and then we'll see it continue down to actually break this low. And that's following through from these two breaks of structure, which were caused a few weeks ago. So the first thing that I'm going to say about Nzdusd is that when we get up into this area here, so however we get up there, when we get up into this area here, I think it's absolutely fine to expect sell volume to come into the market from institutions and to expect the sells to then come out of this area following with this order flow which has been created here. And with that, I do think it's possible that we will then create those longer term, high time frame new lows. So that's essentially what I'm looking at in terms of this sell situation on Nzdusd. So when we do get up here, we can look for sells, and in terms of that, I'll be looking for the hourly time frames to give us that structural transition to sell away from. So with that said, I want to now look at this shorter term price action that's been going on. So on the daily, what we've actually seen now is, so while we're still within that overall sell thesis, we have actually seen a bullish structural transition now on the daily, and that gives us a bullish trend on the daily. So what we've essentially had is first break structure that came from this order block, which is still there, and then we've got now another break structure which has come from this order block here. So for me at the minute, the first thing I'm going to be looking at on NZD is to follow this bullish structure which has been formed, and I think it makes sense to follow it firstly from this order block here. So that's this path. So I think what we could see is a retrace down into this area, and then we'll see the bullish volume come in out of there, which will then give us that bullish move to take us up into our sell order block. Now, what we've also got is this order block down here. So that is a bullish order block, and if we do end up down there, I do think it makes sense that we're going to see at least some type of bullish reaction as we see the institutional buy orders coming into the market. But I do think it's quite unlikely we're going to end up in that one this week. So for me, in terms of the daily, I'm just going to be focused on this order block here mainly, and I'll be looking for buys out of there to then target the high. So that's the daily essentially on NZD. It's basically looking at this retracement back into here, which will then give us that bullish move, which will take us up into this sell order block up here. Then we can look to sell away from that sell order block, following through with the overall sell situation. Now, what's also worth noting more is on the 4 hour, we've got this break of structure that was caused by this order block here. So what that has essentially given us is a more immediate continuation play. And what we could see is that price will just retrace down into this order block here, and then we'll just see price then continuing up from there into this overall sell situation up here. So the first thing I'm going to look at in terms of the timing is if we can see price come down into here on Monday or Tuesday, then we can just look for buys out of there to follow through with a more immediate continuation thesis, which will then take us up into that sell situation. Failing that, and what I think is overall more clear, just because of the amount of volume it takes, is this daily order block. So if this doesn't hold, I'll expect price to follow through down to here with this path. Then when we do get into this area, which is the daily order block, I will expect that buy volume to start coming into the market, and then I'll expect bullish order flow to then take us up into this area up here. So then when we do get into this sell area up here, I will be expecting sell volume to come into the market. Now, of course, it doesn't have to hold, so it could be that this is just the start of a longer term bullish trend, and that absolutely might be the case. But we've still got a clear order block here for sells, so when we do get into this area, I'll at least be expecting some type of bearish reaction. So when we do get up here, whether we come from the 4 hour or from the daily, I will be looking for sales out of that area. So that is Nzdusd this week, guys. So if it's not clear, just check the written version because it should be clearer there, but I think I've explained it. Alright, so I'm moving on to AUD. So we'll start on the weekly with AUD because it's clean. So on AUD, on the weekly, we've had this bearish break structure. So in terms of the weekly situation, we're clearly bearish. And in terms of what I'm expecting to happen, when we do get up into this area, much like with Nzdusd, when we do get into this weekly sell order block, I am expecting the bearish volume to come into the market, which will then take us into lower lows on the weekly. So that's what I'm expecting overall on AUD, that we are now in this bullish counter trend move, which will then take us into this bearish order block, and then we can sell off. Now, of course, we know that this order block doesn't have to hold, so this overall bullish move here could be the start of something bigger, but until we see that broken, I'm expecting it to sell off from there. So now going down to the daily on AUD, what we've got is these two consecutive breaks to the high. So we are fully now in a bullish structure on the daily on AUD, and following that, we've got very similar to the structure on Nzdusd, this order block down here at the extreme, and then this order block, which we just calls the most recent break structure. So for me, what I'll be looking at in terms of the daily this week is really price will come down into this order block here, and then we'll see it buy up out of there, which will take us up into this refinement of a weekly order block and fill that imbalance there. So for me, that's what I think is most likely to happen on AU. We're going to come down here, fill this imbalance, mitigate this order block, and then we'll see that buy volume coming in and take us up to this order block for sales up here. Now, again, I do think the daily holds more weight, and I do think that the most likely path of what's going to happen is this one. But much like on Nzdusd, on the 4 hour, we do have that more immediate continuation play on the 4 hour. So what definitely can happen is, since we've had this 4 hour break, which came from this order block here, we could just see a short retracement into that order block, and then we'll see this order block holding, which will then be the cause of price going higher. So we'll see this 4 hour order block respected, and then that's what will take the price higher into that weekly order block. So on AU this week, I think the first thing to look at is this 4 hour buying opportunity. Failing that, I will be anticipating price to come further down and come into this overall daily, whether or not it's over here or if it's going to come deeper down into this area. And then once we are in this daily order block, I'll just be expecting price to start to buy up and then eventually end up in this overall weekly order block for sells. And then once we are in the weekly order block for sells, we can then see what happens on the hourly time frames. If we do get that bearish structural transition, bearish order flow, I'll be super happy to take sells out of there, and we could actually see a big move on that following from the weekly chart. But of course, if we never see that bearish transition and we do just continue bullish, that's absolutely fine as well. And of course, we could just start a new bullish trend. So have to see what happens on AU, but that's what I'm looking at this week. Alright, so now over to euro dollar. So on euro dollar, on the daily, just like the last 2 weeks, we're in this clear bearish bias range. So within that whole bearish situation, for me, we've got two order blocks to sell from. We've got this extreme order block up here. So if we do get back up here, I think it makes sense to look for sales out of there. We've also got this order block here, which is if we see where the imbalance started, that actually caused the break structure. So for me, it also makes sense for us to sell off out of there. On the lower time frames as well, we've got clear refinements on both areas. So I absolutely think both these areas are fine to look for sales from. Now, considering that, and considering I'm expecting price to go higher in the short term, we have got like over 150 pips to travel upwards to get into even the lower one of these areas. So I think it's going to make sense to look for those counter trend buys and the 4 hour pro trend buys. So last week I spoke about this break here. Now I was a bit surprised just because of this big wick, but like I said, we could have the order block here holding to then push us up. And what has actually happened is price has held that order block there, wicked below it to grab liquidity, but then it has actually just continued higher with the 4 hour thesis that I put forward last week, and it's now broken structure again on the 4 hour. So with that, what we've got now is another 4 hour order block, which caused the most recent break of structure. So for me, this week, going into the start of the week, I'm just simply looking for buys out of this new 4 hour order block. And then hopefully we'll see these buys come in, so we'll retrace down into here to mitigate. We'll get the buy volume coming in, and that will cause another break structure, which will take us into our first potential daily point of interest for sells. So at that point, I'll be looking to see if we do get that sell transition coming out of there, or if we are just going to continue higher to eventually sell off out of here. So that is euro dollar this week. So on pound dollar, there's a couple of more complex things going on. So overall, we've got these last two bearish breaks. So overall, technically on pound dollar, we are in a downtrend. Now, obviously as well, what we've had is this bullish break structure. So we've essentially got the overall downtrend in play, and then we've got bullish intent opposing that. So what that's essentially left us with is this order block for sales up here, which we have now tapped into the lower refinement of. And then we've got this order block for buys down here. So overall on pound dollar, what I'm expecting is at some point that price is going to sell out of this sell POI, and then that'll take us down into this point of interest here, and then we'll see if this is going to hold for buys or if we're going to break it. So considering that, I think that it does make sense, considering that we've now reacted off and essentially put like a double top in here. It does make sense that price will just continue to sell off away from this point of interest and then take us down there. But the thing is with just expecting price to now just sell off away from there is that we've still got a lot of space within this whole order block which hasn't been mitigated. So if there's anything lower on the lower time frames, and like we can see here, there's imbalance in play still there. So any imbalance on the lower time frames still hasn't been mitigated. So whilst technically from the daily perspective, it makes sense that price is going to start moving away from this sell order block to take us down to this buy order block, I do think that probably, and considering the other XXX-USD pairs, that it's going to make more sense here for price to actually come further into this daily 2-day order block following the 4-hour structure before actually then going down to mitigate this bullish order block down here. So if we do see the 4-hour broken and we get that 4-hour bearish structural transition on pound dollar, then I will be happy to look for sells. But until we do see that 4-hour bearish transition, what I'm going to be looking at on pound dollar this week is a 4-hour bullish continuation following away from this break structure that we saw last week. So for me, start of the week, I am just going to expect that this low here is going to hold, and that we are going to essentially just see that bullish price action coming in, respecting this low, and that'll take us deeper into this sell POI. And I think we could refine the POI overall to this refinement up here, which has imbalance on it, only small imbalance, but still. So for me, I think what could make sense is we see the 4-hour continue up to there, we get into the sell order block, and then we see the volume coming in, which is going to take us down into this extreme order block down here on the daily. So that's essentially what I'm looking at on pound dollar. So just following the 4-hour essentially, and then when we do get into this extreme of the 2-day POI where the self-east invalidation is, I will be expecting some sell volume to come in. So I think we can look for sales out of there. Alright guys, so finally now, the pound yen. So on pound yen, I've not marked it up as much as I did last week because I'm just going to focus on the 4-hour. But just looking at the daily, we've still got this bearish, bullish extreme order block, which I spoke about for the last few weeks. So for me, it's making sense still, and we've still got imbalance there. So it's making sense for me that price is going to continue downwards to then eventually mitigate this order block and fill this imbalance. So for me, I am more of a fan of the overall bearish thesis on pound yen than any bullish thesis. Now, considering that, looking at the 4-hour, like I marked out last week, we've got this order block here. So this is a bearish order block. We had imbalance on it. So for me, it's a reasonably high confidence order block. So we've seen the bearish order block. We've now seen this reaction from it. So essentially a push away from it. Price come back up to mitigate this push away, which is minor structure. And now we are just traveling downwards away from this order block. So for me, the only thing I'm really predicting this week on pound yen is that we are just going to see a bearish continuation following away from this order block. So I'll leave it to your guys' discretion on how to get entries into that move. So guys, that's it for this week's forecast. Thank you very much for watching. If you do like these forecasts, please do subscribe to the channel, and I'm super grateful for all the views and subscribers that I get on the channel. So guys, I hope you all have a safe trading week. Stick to your trading plans, stick to your risk management, and have a good week on the charts, guys. Cheers for watching.